Hey, hello. My name is Annika Lundkvist, and I'm the founder of pedestrianspace.org, which is a media initiative, a platform, as well as an NGO based here in Poland, devoted to issues of urban resilience broadly, but with a great focus on walkability in particular. And I'm here today with Sasha Kosanic, as we are both ambassadors for the Plus Change project. Plus Change is funded by the Horizon Europe program and aims to develop strategies and decision-making processes for land use that effectively address challenges related to climate change, biodiversity, and human well-being. I'm so honored to be an ambassador for this program. I think it's really innovative what they've done, the leaders for this project. Thank you, Juliana, when you're listening to this, in bringing in a number of these ambassadors, as we are called, representing different communities that are often overlooked, unseen, unheard, lesser represented in land use decisions. So I am representing the topic broadly of walkability as well as urban agriculture. And I'm here today with Sasha. And I find it really interesting because, Sasha, you are the first ambassador that I'm interviewing as part of my work with the Plus Change Project. I'm going to be interviewing diverse ambassadors and partner cases. There's several partner city cases. So you're the first one, the pioneer interview. And I think that's also really special because of who you represent. You represent people with disabilities, which is within the realm of walkability, really a sore point in many places. The disinvestment, the lack of representation, care, attention to people with disabilities. So I am always in my work looking for best practices, places that are doing well for people with disabilities in terms of walkable urbanism, and then also seeing where they're not represented. So I'm really interested to connect with you. Maybe we can just start off with a little bio from you, who you are, what you're working with.
Well, Annika, thank you very much for this invitation. I'm very happy to contribute to this talk about walkability because I think it's really, really important from various perspectives for different marginalized communities, but in particular for people with disabilities. So my name is Sasha Kosanic, as you said. I'm senior lecturer at the Liverpool John Moores University. My topic is originally climate change, impact on biodiversity, ecosystem services, and human well-being. And around 4 or 5 years ago, we also went into the topic of disability and environmental change because we noticed that there is very little research on climate change impact on people with disabilities, but also how the not extreme events of climate change, but also slow set events of climate change impact people with disabilities, such as biodiversity loss, sea level rise, and etc. So basically, yeah, I'm looking also in my research into people with disabilities as an approach. Yeah, and I'm based in Liverpool, UK.
Okay, right. And I will include the link to your bio at the Plus Change site when I publish this. And I'm reading here, you write, I'm representing people with disabilities as one of the most marginalized groups, i.e. 16% of the global population. This marginalized group has been broadly overlooked in research, particularly in recent anthropogenic changes. Do you have any understanding yet or insight why this is the case, that this group is broadly overlooked?
Well, because I guess they didn't have someone at the table to put their agenda at the table, and yeah, I would say this would be probably, that's a very good question, but I would say that would be probably the main reason. When you look 16%, it's quite a big number. And still, but it's like in many research topics, like if we want to talk also about decolonization of the science, we always had one part of looking in the science. And I think now, hopefully, lots of things are changing. So we are looking also into intersectional inequalities. For example, indigenous peoples with disabilities, that was one of my projects in Madagascar, and how they're impacted with climate change. So yeah, I think merely people with disabilities didn't have a voice, like they don't have voice in um, uh, many topics.
So as part of our role as ambassadors is in a way using our own voices to also voice some of the needs of the communities we represent, right? So I think it could be really interesting to use this moment even to provide some education. This is also a new area for me. So to learn from you some small things. We're doing a short interview here, but what does it mean, for example, with marginalized populations, but specifically people with disabilities and the impact from environmental change? Can you share any examples from your research, even if it's extremely specific, for example, what you were talking about with Madagascar, about different ways that people with disabilities are affected?
Yeah, I mean, I in Madagascar we have a very small number of people with disabilities because we looked at indigenous communities, so maybe it's not a great representation, but they were affected with the loss of forest and not availability, for example, to go for walks, because we all need the nature for well-being, right? So they could not access the forest any longer because of deforestation. So this is not direct impact of climate change, but it's also human impact. Some of the other people, other communities, they also had problems with accessing the food, because the thing is, not particularly, we didn't have this exact population in Madagascar, but it's known that, for example, children with disabilities, when there is a lack of food because drought or something like that, they have a problem in gaining enough nutrition, because in indigenous communities people usually sit at one table, and who is faster get more food. And children with disabilities, they're usually not that quick in getting the food and chewing. And of course, that depends on different types of disabilities. But yeah, that is one of the problems that can get with the climate change, environmental change, floods, droughts, and the lack of food. The other problem that I would say now that we saw this year, in particular in Europe, it's heat waves. And this is the direct impact of climate change on everyone, but in particular on people with disabilities. Because, again, access to green spaces in urban environments and where they can cool down a bit, it's usually very hard or very difficult for people in disabilities. I don't know how it's in Poland, but here in UK, it's very hard to get to the parks if you have a wheelchair, because they put these ramps for the motorbikes. So it's very, very, very difficult. But also it's, some disabilities are more vulnerable to heat. So for example, multiple sclerosis, if you have multiple sclerosis, that's very hard to regulate your temperature. But also people with, I think, quadriplegia, or everyone with a spine injury, it's also hard to regulate the temperature. So it is a huge problem, and we still although we are talking about climate change for scientists are talking for 30 years now, but we are still not making any effort, or not maybe any effort, but enough effort to mitigate and to adapt to the climate change. And we are still in the process where we don't have a solution for people without disabilities. And then we don't have in particular solution for people with disabilities. And I think this is a huge problem. So these are the extreme events, but also, for example, another extreme event is what happened in Germany, I think 2 years ago. I'm not sure right now, but there was also flooding, and people in an elderly home with disabilities died because they were not evacuated on time. So yeah, these are extreme events, but then we have these slow onset events, which is the loss of biodiversity, and we all know that biodiversity, we need nature benefits to stay healthy and to stay active for our mental but also physical well-being. And we need to, with the climate change, what actually this research in Madagascar showed, we can have biodiversity loss, but also in this case, as I said, it was not related to climate change, but to human impact. But in some other areas, it's related to climate change. And then we have a problem of people accessing the areas with the biodiversity. But it doesn't have to also be climate change impact. The access is, as you know, access to the nature for people with disabilities is in many cases not good, or not good for all disabilities. Saying this, I'm not advocate for changing the nature. Nature should be nature. No, but still, we can still make the nature more accessible without some tremendous impact. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That's a lot you brought up. I'm glad we're recording this. And I liked how you brought it from Madagascar to the UK, and also said you don't know how it is here in Poland. Well, I am doing my research on walkability and walkable urbanism, and also advocate for walkability through pedestrian space. And I'm really glad you brought up green space, because that's a huge aspect for me of the big picture with walkability in terms of sustainable urban development, 21st century sustainable cities. We need to be prioritizing urban nature, or nature,
Yes.
however we're going to put it. Even small pocket parks, the practical benefits of the well-maintained small neighborhood park are massive. You go to these small neighborhood parks and you see often many elderly people, many people with young children, and yes, often sometimes disabled people too. These are refuge places for people who don't have mobility issues, etc. They're maybe often running, longer distances through the city, but these neighborhood parks are really sanctuaries. And especially, as you brought up, I'm glad you brought up the heat too, because this is only becoming exacerbated. And in terms of public health, access to quality, well-maintained green space in the city is critical. And as you mentioned, also a lot of times marginalized individuals and people with disabilities suffer access. So this is extremely important. And I'm glad you brought it back to Europe, because indeed it's an issue in many European cities as well, but we know a global issue too. So I'm really glad you highlighted that. This is something I hope to continue, a problem I hope to work on for a long time. And as I told you before we started recording, my mission at Pedestrian Space is not to represent one group, but to understand the holistic picture and the universal picture. Cities are made up of children, people, men, women, elderly, middle-aged, young, teenagers, all sorts of religious backgrounds, racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds. And my ongoing goal is sort of understanding the bigger picture, which means also being able to listen and tap into all of the voices of different communities. So speaking with you, for example, and getting a better pulse on some of the issues with disabled people is really critical. In the final minutes of this interview, I just want to hear from you anything else you'd like to share about becoming a Plus Change ambassador, what you're looking forward to, what do you think? We're still in the first year of the project, correct? So what you're kind of excited about and also really looking forward to represent for the community that you are sharing your voice for.
Well, yeah, I think land use change is one of the environmental changes that is happening, and also one of the most important causes for biodiversity loss, and then again well-being, our well-being. What I'm interested to see whether we can give again a voice to people with disabilities in land use change, and see whether they can be a part of keeping the traditional, in particular, traditional practices in different areas of how we use the land and why we use the land and who use the land. So I would like to give the voice for people with disabilities so they are not neglected, because I think they can have a voice in different environments, mountain environment, like a lowland rivers environment. Basically, yeah, I think that if we want to go towards sustainable futures, we need to, preserve the traditional land use change and traditional land use practices. And I think people with disabilities should not be excluded from this. Yeah.
I completely agree with you. Well, I thank you for your time. I look forward to continued dialogue with you. Maybe we'll have part 2 interviews next year. And I am really grateful to learn about your work. It's very interesting. It's also very critical. I wasn't aware also of the statistics of what percentage of the global population disabled people are. And also, maybe to close, you can share about the diversity within disability, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. We need to understand how these changes are impacting different types of disabilities. So, at the moment, conservation strategies for conserving the nature, different species, are developed only on the basis of population without disability. So, for example, if you have a sight impairment, and you go to the mountains, you will not see the mountains, but you will smell, you will hear, you will touch. So all these senses are kind of, I would say, contributing to your experience of nature. But no one is taking this into account. So we are not taking into account people with sensory disabilities, people with walking disabilities, whether for example, someone with a wheelchair, if you don't have a cable car, won't be able to be at the top of the mountain. They won't see that view. So we need to think about this, and then it's very all this it's in a very early stage, and there are lots of missing gaps in research at the moment. Yeah, we need to take into account people with the different disabilities. And at the moment, I'm also doing one project on biosphere reserves in Germany and Slovenia, where we looked how people with different disabilities are experiencing the benefits of the nature. Yeah, so this is, and I am also starting to understand how this different with different types of disabilities.
Okay, really interesting. And I really like what you wrote also for the Plus Change, that you're looking forward to novel research findings and collaborating with other ambassadors so we hopefully can tackle intersectional inequalities. What you just said too about the cable car, it made me remember I was on vacation with my family this past summer in Budapest, and for the first time I saw at a playground a wheelchair accommodated swing. It was my first time seeing one. I've lived in multiple countries, multiple cities, and this was my first time seeing, maybe you've seen them. It was this
I
massive
did, yeah.
thing where you could roll the wheelchair. It was my very first time. And I thought, how is this possible that I've lived in so many places and why isn't this more common? So the idea of interdisciplinary work to create solutions, common sense, practical solutions, for example, for disabled people to experience nature in multiple ways, play in different ways, and all these natural environments too. So I really like that idea of increasing interdisciplinary collaborations and insight to accommodate that.
Yeah, I think, the thing is, we cannot tackle any of the environmental problems that are happening. Land use change, sea use change, climate change, biodiversity loss without interdisciplinary work. There is basically, we cannot reach sustainable future without interdisciplinary, and I would say also transdisciplinary work, because we need to work with NGOs or different organizations just to understand what we are missing and what is happening at the local scale, because climate change will be different widely, globally. It will affect different places differently, and then, of course, different people and the other thing is that the people in different places have different resources to adapt to the climate change and to react to the extreme events. So this is something that we also need to think about. And this climate change adaptation for people with disabilities, it's a really, really important topic that it's ongoing, and yes, and we need to put more research into this.
Absolutely. I think that's a great note to end on. Call to It's an all hands on deck call. I love how you brought it from interdisciplinary also to transdisciplinary. I am a person interested in such work, so I look forward to continuing to communicate with you as ambassadors for Plus Change and beyond. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to future communication with you as well. Thank you.